Hello everyone, welcome to the In the Frame podcast. I'm Luke, this is Pip, and today we have the honour of having an academic with us. He is responsible for 3 academic papers on sound design, working on lots of independent classics such as our own Vinyl Revival, Long and Winding Road, Here and Now, as well as some more bigger profile stuff for helping out with shows like Lincon, Pirates of the Caribbean, Kingsmen, Golden Circles, and has a book coming out next year. It's Dr. Neil Hillman. How you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Nice to see you both. That was one heck of a build-up, really. I'm a foot soldier.
It kept going. It was good. Yeah.
I'm a foot soldier in sound.
I think when you do the edit, Luke, there's got to be like a little drum roll that's just building in the background there.
That'd be so funny. I'll so do that. How you doing, Neil? How are
Yeah,
things?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good, and it's not actually been that long since we were in this room. The 3 of us in this room together. This is my mixing room that we're set up in, and of course we were doing Long and Winding Road together. The 3 of us signing off that mix, which was not the third film that we've done together, because actually, Pip, we've done 5 films together.
I think 5.
It was, but themed 3: Last Shop Standing, Final Revival, and Long and Winding Road. So
that's right.
I gotta say, it was so
important.
much fun being in your studio, watching you work, and kind of figure out how to get the sound sorted. Because I did the edit for Long and Winding Road. I just tried to make everything sound okay, but then you just made it one. It's just super expansive and incredible, and so it's great seeing you work with what you do. And so let's get straight into it. And so your whole life has been about capturing and creating sound in the film, in film and television. What has driven that passion in you?
Pretty much most of my work in life. I started off when I left school. I did an apprenticeship and actually studied electronics, and through being at university got involved with university radio, and that just cemented what was already a passion for radio and music. But what predates all of that is, from a small child, cinema, being absolutely passionate about cinema. And then I became quite obsessive about the sound as I became a teenager. That went with it. Somehow it spoke to me. I think I'm quite a visual person. I love taking still photographs. But it's something about adding sound that gives a greater depth. There's more emotion. From a narrative point of view, I think that you have so much more scope to tell a story. And a pretty obvious point that the picture is constrained by the frame. The sound, of course, is not constrained by the frame, and we can do some great stuff when we decouple the sound from the pictures. So sound is not necessarily the shadow of pictures. They can be uncoupled, and often that's when you have the most fun with or can communicate more deeply, when you disconnect the pictures from the sound.
Amazing. Yeah.
I mean, just moving on from that a little bit, Neil, sort of thinking about some of the work that you've done, how, kind of just illustrate that point for us, really, in terms of understanding just what sound does, in terms of moving pictures.
Well, some of those. One of the things that I specialise in is ADR, automatic dialogue replacement. So there, I'm part of a team and helping people, and that's where sort of the big ticket titles on my IMDb profile have come from. Things like Lincon for Steven Spielberg, and Kingsmen and things like that. That's where I've been contributing dialogue. That's been replaced because either through performance, but most usually because there's been a change in edit, or there's been a change of emphasis with pictures that the artist needs to come back in and needs to revoice as well. So that's the kind of work that I do, and I feel that I can contribute there because as a dialogue editor, I'm passionate about things like effortless intelligibility. It's a phrase that I use quite a lot when I teach young filmmakers, is that effortless intelligibility is really how we keep people's attention on what we're doing. So in ADR, we're making sure that it's giving the greatest clarity so that the mixer at the final mixing stage can make the decision, maybe we don't want to hear it as clearly as it was recorded, but at least we start with this absolute clarity going forward. So on my own films, where I work as, sort of pass the ball to myself, where I'll be the location sound recordist as well as the person doing the post-production audio, then I'm absolutely passionate again that this effortless intelligibility is giving me the opportunity to get the best possible raw product to be able to take to the mixing stage. So so the way that I work is either supporting other dialogue editors by the ADR work that I do, or I work as a supervising sound editor to someone like you, Pip, and I will either start right at the beginning as a consultant and help design a Bible, if you like, of how sound will be recorded on location and how we'll treat it through post-production. And it may be that I do the location sound recording as well as a production mixer, and I take it through into post-production as well. It kind of depends on what the schedule is. It depends on what the project is. There's a variable thing, number of things. But by sort of mixing it up like that, I really enjoy that. I've got quite a lot of stuff going on at any one time.
Brilliant.
Awesome. And so tell us a bit about your life in film and sound. Where did it begin? And then what are the highlights been so far?
Oh, wow. Well, it just really, because I'm sort of an enthusiast, the highlights just kind of keep coming and coming and coming. I mean, obviously the pinnacle is the last film that I did with Pip, obviously, that was the
it was a great film.
Oh, that was the ultimate. But so just going back, so at university radio, I was working in industry in a machine tool industrial setting, and I applied for a trainee's job at Central Television, which was here in Birmingham. That was one of the 15 ITV companies. In fact, it was what was called one of the big 5 ITV companies. And the big 5 ITVs, if I can do it from memory, Central, Granada, Yorkshire, London Weekend Television and Thames, they vied for, or pretty much carved up, what you saw on ITV, apart from just a few, sort of other regional things. So the background to that was I received the most amazing training. I mean, incredible training. And I feel so grateful for that. And rather passionate that, youngsters coming in to the industry now are not getting that same opportunity that I had. I feel quite strongly that it's my job to sort of pay back the training that I had. But that training enabled me to learn about studio operations. In those days, we were working on film cameras. We had a film dubbing suite. We also had video cameras on location. We had news cameras on location. I learned to mix the news live. So I'm very proud that my first post-production work was as a film, working on film as a film assistant film dubbing mixer. My first location work was as a film sound recordist. I was an assistant first and then as a film recordist. And then video came along. And the reason why video sort of trailed a little bit on location was just purely down to the fact that the cameras hadn't got good enough resolution to be able to sustain a long program. At those times, they were used for news, and 6-minute items, I think, were the longest that anything could be shown for. Which, from an academic point of view, I think gives us a really interesting insight into this sort of short attention span that the television industry feels that viewers have got. Of course, that isn't the case, but there is definitely an inherited trend that, oh, you know, move on, keep it fast, short items and what have you. And I think that that's really where it stems from, because we didn't have that issue when we were shooting on film, other than the film magazine would last a certain time, then we would need to change. But that idea of short news items that can't be longer than, you know, a minute and a half, because you know the public is too stupid to understand what's going on, is really a hangover from there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So so that was Central. We had Mrs. Thatcher and the Big Bang in the 1990s, when she famously announced at Downing Street at a dinner one night that she felt that television was the last bastion of restrictive practice. And she was at a reception that she was given for the ITV bosses at the time, and it sort of sent shockwaves through the establishment. But she was out of power. But shortly after, about 94, mid 90s, it became the ITV franchises were applied for. There was some people paid an enormous amount of money for their franchises. Some people paid very little. Stock prices went up. There was it was like monopoly. And we saw the end of the ITV system, basically. Mass redundancies, the upsurge of independent production companies who were given some pretty lucrative budgets in those days to get some content made. And I have to say that for the most part, it was at the expense of the freelancers who were servicing them. There was some, pretty difficult working practices that were forced upon the freelance workforce. That obviously isn't the case so much now with the production budgets that are available. That, you know, production companies are struggling as much as freelancers are to maintain rates and what have you. But that's the sort of background of that. So I left Central around about 1990 to get ahead. It was very, very obvious that, there was a big bang coming. And I spent 10 years freelance as a sound recordist and as an outside broadcast sound mixer, and also a studio sound mixer as well. Round about 1999, I joined a small facility company that wanted to open a sound department because they'd got a rather large commission, a 26-part commission. And so I joined as head of sound, set up a sound department, and some other guys joined me as well. And we worked together. And during that time, between 1999 and 2000, I got to make a documentary, location, sound recording, and then afterwards doing the post-production for it whilst I was head of sound for this company. And that was with the Red Arrows, the RAF Red Arrows. And the time spent with those guys and their pursuit of excellence in absolutely everything just completely struck a chord with me. And I realized that I couldn't go back to a sort of that'll do attitude. And very shortly afterwards, I handed my notice in and I started the audio suite. So the audio suite started in 2002. And I took a room in a place in the centre of Birmingham. I was one man with one desk. And we just were very lucky. I picked up some work, which meant that I needed to have somebody to help me. Then we needed a second studio, and quite quickly we moved premises to having a Dolby theatre, 3 other dubbing mixing rooms, and we were really busy. So for 10 years, our record, I think I'm right in saying, was at least 1 hour of network television every week for every year of the 10 years that we were operating in there. Wow. Which was incredible, because we were working from Birmingham, which was sort of losing favour as a place to make programmes. So incredibly proud of that. 2012, the market really changed. BBC Birmingham had closed down, ITV Central had closed down. A lot of people moved away. We had a tremendous butterfly effect almost as soon as the BBC announced that they were leaving Birmingham. And whilst we mainly serviced people who were outside of the region, because we were championing remote working. So from 2005, we were a completely accessible remote operation. And my vision always was that my engineers, I wasn't running ICI, but we had 7 on the payroll at our peak. But my vision always was, back in 2003, 2004, was that my engineers would be able to work where they felt comfortable on, whatever schedule that suited them, so long as they knew that the client would be coming in for the final mix or the pre-mix by a certain time. And we just couldn't get the technology to work. You either had to have big consoles, which we'd got in the studios, or small laptop systems, but the two things didn't talk. And it was incredibly frustrating, because we wanted to, pioneer the way that we're working today. We wanted to do that. We wanted to do that back then. So it's pretty exciting that we're in that position now. So 2012, I saw that the market had changed. Our engineers were all very carefully placed. Nobody was, cast to the wind. And so we had over a 12-month transition. And then I just came home. I brought my studios home to mainly sound design for feature films and to support feature films. So the setup that I have at home, I have 2 studios, as you know. I'm telling you what you know. I have 2 studios. I have the main mixing room here. And then behind me in another room is a voice booth and a track laying room. And we have connectivity. So we've been ISDN connected because we do ADR with people like Warner Brothers in Hollywood for those films that you've mentioned. And now, of course, we're working over IP, so we have audio over IP connectivity as well. So for us, this is just a very logical way to continue working. And I was really frustrated in the middle 2000s, because we'd written our own software and an application that sat on a web browser that enabled us to transfer files, to have audit trails of when files were uploaded, when they went down. And it was so difficult to get the industry to move away from biking a drive round, or we've just been sitting here waiting for this time to come. So I'm very excited that it's here, but yeah.
It took a while.
It took a while. And now where am I? Well, I enjoy picking and choosing projects, not because I'm so wealthy that I can just choose what I want, but I realize that I can only work with people who are passionate. I can only give my best to people who are equally passionate about their project. If you're not passionate about your project, how can you expect me to be passionate about it on your behalf? And there has been, sort of instances of that. And happily, since I came home and started working here and been, a bit selective, it's been happy days.
Amazing.
So, Neil, take us back, because obviously I know quite a lot about stuff that you've done, but I know, for instance, that you worked on Top Gear, didn't you?
I did.
So I'm kind of interested
that's so cool.
I'm kind of interested in that you've obviously done the whole 360 kind of gambit of everything to do with sound, as you've already explained. But what are some of the really key things that you've learned about sound from location sound, like you were doing on the show like Top Gear, and various other things that you've done, through to the kind of the post-production work that you do, and specifically that you do now? What are some of the kind of key things that you can lift out of that to explain to people just why sound is so important when you're actually making films, perhaps in a language that kind of emerging filmmakers can get their heads around?
Well, I really think that where I put growth on was in the 1990s as a jobbing freelance sound operative. Let's use the word operative, because I was covering quite a few areas. So you're quite right. I did work on Top Gear when that came out of Birmingham. That's where it originated. And traveled quite extensively with that. That was quite good. I also worked on a program called Tomorrow's World, which was a program that came out of Science and Features in London, BBC London. And so Horizon, Top Gear, and Tomorrow's World really taught me about sound design. So now I consider that I'm a sound designer, and we use the term sound design, but I think it's Gore Vidal who says that no experience is lost on a writer. And for a sound person, no job is lost in giving you the experience that you need. So I would say that a sound designer, if you're a young filmmaker and you're considering, right, well, I'm going to record my film and then we're going to have some sound design, I have to tell you that your first level of sound design is the person that you've got recording the sound for you. So what I learned was rubbish in, rubbish out. It is impossible to polish something that is not particularly well crafted in the first place. You're on the back foot to start with. And those things that are scuppering you are usually very avoidable. It's not rocket science. There are some laws of physics, of course, that you have to observe, but these are not by any means difficult to understand. For instance, if you double the distance that the microphone is away from my mouth, you will halve the level of my voice. So it's pretty simple to understand that you need to get pretty close. If you're indoors, it's best not to use the kind of microphone, a 416, for instance, a shotgun microphone, indoors because of the nature of it, because it picks up a lot of the back of the microphone than it does at the front. So those are two kind of things, and we can give it as a little bit of a tip at the end if you like. But those kind of things, and fitting radio mics and finding that it's really quite difficult to get either the tone of the voice nice and round because it's here, or there are rustling on clothes and what have you. So that's really where I put on my growth. That's enabled me to be a sound designer, to say, I wouldn't be doing that. There's a simple way to do that. And that keep it simple principle really is something to absolutely observe. So the prime means of capturing sound on location is a microphone at the end of a fishpole. It is so flexible for you. It will help you so much, but it means you do need to have someone who knows how to position a microphone. That's, there is no magic. We don't have an audio equivalent of a zoom lens or a wide angle lens. We haven't got that. The microphone needs to be put into the right position, and that job is quite skillful. So, that really my biggest point that I would make is pay really, really close attention to the sound that you're recording on location. It isn't difficult, but it's not easy, if that makes sense. It needs care, it needs planning, and time spent in planning is never wasted.
And before we get on to, I know Luke's going to ask a kind of final question, but I'm also interested as well, because I know that you teach, at a very high academic level, and you've obviously you've got a doctorate in sound yourself, and were mentored by Spielberg sound designer. But you're very passionate about how sound enables emotion. Just give me a little bit of a lowdown on, because I think you've given us some good technical stuff around sound, but I'm kind of really interested in getting across the whole point of the reason for those things is so that you actually have at your hand as a filmmaker, when it comes to that final post-production, you have something very powerful that you can use and orchestrate to make your film a far more potent, emotional, accessible piece of work.
Well, the book that Luke, you very kindly plugged at the start, that's coming out in 2021, is solely dedicated to the way in which emotion is such an important part of sound design. So it's called the 4 sound areas. And it's an original concept that I've written about, where sound for any moving picture project is a constituent of four elements: a narrative element, an abstract element, a spatial element, and a temporal element as well. So any sound can be into one of those 4 areas.
Over the years, you've really helped me understand that, even though I'm working as a filmmaker in what's, a very visual medium, that visual medium is massively supported and accentuated by the soundscape that you're providing and using within that. And obviously our last project we did together, which was around, live music in live venues, which was technically incredibly difficult in many ways, and we were thwarted on many levels, but you were able to really help us provide that sense of it feeling like the audience was in that live space. So I guess it's kind of thinking again, particularly for younger emerging filmmakers who are working on kind of tight budgets and stuff, how they can take the principles that you're talking about and ensure that they are employing everything they can to eventually do what you're talking about, which is connect that audience into what they want them to encounter.
It's bedding the pictures into the real world, really. That's what
Right.
sound is doing, because we take sound for granted. We take the fact that we listen for granted. We have lids on our eyes, but we don't have lids on our ears. Our ears are constantly working, and for the first 9 months of our lives, that's all that we've got. We've got sound, and we come from this gestation of sound, and then we're born into sight, and it sort of overwhelms us. This is a topic that Walter Murch talks very eloquently about, how human beings are gestated in sound, born into sight. But cinema, of course, was born in sight because we had silent movies, and then it gestated in sight, and then it was born into sound. The fact that the talkies came later. So I think it's the bedding of the images into a real world, or for me to suggest something to you of that real world that the pictures don't necessarily. Which do you trust more? Do you trust the pictures, or do you trust the sound? Which is the one that suggests most to you? I think the other thing is pictures can be a bit like music, in the sense that they can tell you what to feel. So as a sound mixer, you need to be careful when you're given a score, and you need to have a good relationship with the director to say, look, we can have sound design or we can have music, but there's not really space for both of them at the same time. What do you want to do? And I'm a strong believer that music tells you what to believe. Oh, I feel happy because this is in a major key. Oh, I feel a bit sad, or this is a bit suspenseful, it's in a minor key, it's in a diminished chord. So that, whereas I believe that through sound effects and through atmospheres, we're asking you, how do you feel? We're constantly asking, how do you feel about this? Now, how do you feel? Now, what do you feel? What are you feeling at the moment? And if it's something that you haven't experienced before, then that's unnerving. If it's something that you have, it helps you to remember how you felt at that time when you last experienced it. So it's working on really quite a subconscious level. I'm absolutely not suggesting that sound is any more important than pictures, or pictures are more important. They work together beautifully. It's that which is the absolute killer app, if you like, of moving pictures, the fact that we put good sound with it. But as soon as you diminish that sound, you break the spell, and you've lost. So you can lose an audience because they didn't hear what was said. So this effortless intelligibility is really so important.
Brilliant. Before we go into our last question, I have a spontaneous question to ask you. Thinking about young filmmakers and where they're going in the future, of what production and what filmmaking looks like, my mind always turns to stuff like Vine, and now its successor, TikTok and Musical.ly and such. And it almost feels like, if I'm to make a deduction, that how those new social media platforms and how those new ways of engaging with content is a lot more sound and music led than it is visually led nowadays. And it's really interesting seeing the difference between how we used to make content visually first and then add sound to it, and now everyone's going, oh, I like this sound effect, let's make something visual to it. What do you think going forwards this could do to how we engage with content and how we engage with sound, and what do you think about this?
I think that on social media, you've got some really savvy operators, really savvy, and they are the proof in point, if you like. The effortless intelligibility means that people will listen to the message. If you lose the audience, then you know you've lost them. And sound is giving you that opportunity to add impact and to make things memorable. So I think on social media, it's a great example of, you know, people adapting to, people need to hear what's going on. They really do.
Amazing. And so finally, thank you so much for coming on. It's been wonderful hearing all about your experiences and learning about sound with you. What would be your top tips for emerging filmmakers who wanted to learn more about sound with their limited resources? Where would you recommend they turn first to learn more?
There are lots of really good resources online, really very good resources. I would suggest that if you are making films, and I would urge you as a filmmaker or an aspiring filmmaker to make lots of films, go and shoot films and go and listen to how microphones sound. They don't sound like your ears do. They work in a completely different way. They don't differentiate the way that our brain enables us to differentiate things. So get to know how a microphone sounds. Just go and play. It's really important. But I come back to this emphasis of, you need to get the location sound right. You need to capture the sound cleanly in the first place.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Think, just on that again, I mean, from a point of view of a lot of filmmakers struggle, you know, with resources and stuff. Are there some, you know, kind of I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but like, you know, you talk about listen. I think that's a really great tip about listening to different microphones, and even just listening to the microphones that you have access to understand a little bit about what they give you, like particularly if it's indoors or outdoors, etc. But you know, you mentioned there's some great sort of resources that are out there. I mean, I mean, maybe you could email this to us and we can put it on the thing. But I mean, is there anything that completely leaps out to mind at the moment for you where there's a good spaces to go and get information from?
Filmsoundorg is a great resource. There's some great contributors there, but you know, there's plenty of Facebook groups that you can join as well as a student or as a novice, and people welcome people onto those. I think that most sound people and people who run sound groups and sound forums are more than happy. You know, in fact, they're delighted to have people who are asking questions. I think as a group of people, we love to share the craft. You know, it was shared with us, and we're really happy to share that knowledge and to pass that on. So I would urge you to, you know, I mean, Facebook is a very good resource for location recording tips, microphone placement tips, post-production sound tips. There's quite a few, so I'm sure that I could send you some across. But as I say, as a resource, filmsound.org is well worth looking at. And also listen when you watch a film. You know, be aware of what's going on. What's gone on in that soundtrack? It's not just music. There's some very careful atmosphere beds gone in there, as well as sound effects and Foley and what have you.
That's a good tip. I often advise people to go to like some of their favourite scenes in the films that they really love, or classic scenes like you know a Spielberg film, a Hitchcock film, whatever, and actually close your eyes and just listen to the scene. Don't watch the scene and see what you experience. It can be really, really illuminating. And then sometimes you need to go and investigate a little bit about what was really going on there to get an idea. But that was fantastic, Neil. Some really great advice there.
Okay. I mean, it's the same as going out in the real world. If you just go and sit in a park, close your eyes. How many sound layers can you identify? There'll be distant traffic. There'll be some kids running in the background. There may be a plane going overhead. The wind may be rustling in the trees. There's four levels before you even start thinking about other stuff that might go in there. So, yeah.
I once watched some behind the scenes of Billie Eilish and Phineas and how they create their music, and they recommend just taking your phone and notes and recording sounds in the wild whenever you find something interesting that could work and that's different to add to your kind of creations as you keep going.
So there's a good thing about often atmospheric noise is a problem with budget films, where you choose locations where the extraneous noise is an issue. Well, use the recorder on your phone and just record what it is when it's there. Have a conversation while you're there in a room, listen to how reverberant it is and what have you, because you'll hear what the microphone is going to hear. So, a lot of times it's a bit of common sense. Can you shoot at that location when the traffic isn't at rush hour? Can you shoot in a restaurant and shoot it so that you don't see all the people who are in the background? Can you go in early in the morning and do your dialogue scenes, and then can you do your wide shots with people in later in the afternoon? So really just being creative about the way in which you shoot things. And that's really one of the things that I do as part of the consultancy, is look at a script and right from looking at the script is deciding what could be giving us an issue here. How would we handle this?
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure as always. Have you got where could our audience find you if they want to follow you more of what you're doing?
There's drneilhillman.com, which will take you through to the Audio Suite website. So that's where I'm at. You can see the films that I've done on IMDb under Neil Hillman. So
exciting.
Thanks,
Thank you
Neil.
so much.
Brilliant.
Remember to subscribe and follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more content from OSBD. We'll be doing more of these podcasts in the coming weeks. So tune in next Friday. Thank you all and goodbye.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.